So this is a vertex. It's a point in 3D space. It has an x coordinate, it has a y coordinate, and it has a z coordinate. And as a point in 3D space, it isn't conventionally visible in a renderer. In order to have something visible, we need an actual surface, and the simplest surface we can use is a triangle. Triangle consists of 3 points, so we'll make 3 points. So I'm just going to shift drag this out, and there's our third point. So we have 3 points. Now I need to tell that these points are connected by generating a polygon. So I have here my polygon, which is a simple triangle. What I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to go into the object properties, and I'm going to make sure that we backface cull. And what this means is that when we look on the other side of the object, we can see that it effectively disappears. And in game engines in particular, geometry is only one-sided. So that means that if you have a triangle, typically you can only see one side of the triangle, and if you want to see both sides, you have to enable the material, which is typically known as two-sided. If I switch into edge mode, we can see the 3 edges. And basically these edges connect each of the vertices. There are 2 vertices for every edge. These edges have only got 1 polygon associated with them. If I go in and shift drag this edge, you can see that this edge now has 2 polygons associated with it. And again, I can shift drag here, and you can see that this edge has 2 polygons associated with it. This edge only has 1 polygon associated with it, and it's known as an open edge. And in 3ds Max, we call this a border. So if I select border tool and I click on an edge, you can see it's selected the open edges. And if I try and select any other edges, you'll see that these edges don't highlight because they're not open edges. If a polygon has got 3 sides, it's a triangle. If a polygon's got 4 sides, it's a quad. And if a polygon's got more than 4 sides, we call it an n-gon. N-gons are bad, quads are good, and triangles are ugly, but sometimes they're necessary. Triangles are useful because no matter what we do with the 3D points, so if I move them around, no matter where I put these 3D points, the surface will always be flat. And that's very useful when it comes to computer graphics optimization, because knowing that a surface is flat makes it easier to render. The same can't be said for quads and n-gons. Whilst this quad is perfectly flat, it is very easy to distort it just by moving one of the vertices. And when we do this, the surface becomes bent, or as we call it, non-planar. And you can see that the surface is now actually made out of 2 triangles. If you want to see the triangles, you can switch to edit triangle mode, and we can actually see a dotted line, which is the virtual representation of the 2 triangles that make this quad. What makes quads more useful than triangles is that they have an opposite edge. If I select this edge and I go to ring, you can see that this edge on the other side of the quad was selected. And if I select this edge and I click ring, you can see that the opposite edge was selected. And that's because there is an opposite edge of a quad. Again, this is not true of triangles, and it isn't true of n-gons. Surfaces that are connected together are considered to be in the same element. So I have element selected, and if I click on anywhere on any of these surfaces, then the whole of all 3 polygons will become selected. And that is because they are all connected together. If I click on face mode and I click, then I can highlight individual faces. If I delete this face in the middle, then these two faces are no longer connected. And if I go into element mode and I click, you can see that I now only have the individual faces selected. And this is irrespective of the complexity of these surfaces. So if I go into edge mode and I extrude some extra geometry, so this now has 3 faces, this has 2 faces. If I go into face mode, I can select the individual faces. If I go into element mode, whenever I click, I will select both of these faces. So this is one element, and if I go over here and select this, this is a separate element. Even though this object has 2 separate elements, it is just the one object. It is a single object. And if I go into hierarchy mode, we can see where the pivot is for this object. And basically the pivot is how Max and a game engine knows where the object is in space. But what I can also do is I can split this into separate objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this element and I'm going to detach it, which basically gives me some options. And the most important one is I'm going to detach it as an object, and it's going to tell me what I'm going to call it. So OK. You should notice now that you can see that the bounding box has changed, and now when it comes to elements, all I can do is to select this one. So this is the entire element for this object. I can no longer select this because it's in a separate object. So what if I click on this object? Well, we can see that its pivot point is still at the origin. It's in the same place. And this can be rather confusing because how do we tell the two objects apart? And just to clarify that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change where the pivot is to the center of the object. So now we have this object, which is object 1, and we have this object, which is just object. And we can see that their pivot points are in different positions. And we can tell that they're different objects.